we have to sell Graceland. And I just looked at him and I said, that will never
Hello
happen.
everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the shocking story of Elvis Presley. For almost 50 years, Graceland remained still in remembrance of the rock and roll king, Elvis Presley. Millions of people walked through its corridors, marveled at his jumpsuits with rhinestones, and placed flowers by his tomb, but far above them, behind a closed door, was a portion of the house that had never been touched, sealed like a time capsule that no one dared to open. Even seasoned archaeologists were shocked by what they saw when the attic door was finally unlocked in 2025. A startling find among the collection boxes astounded everyone. It wasn't just misplaced recordings or letters, but something much more intimate and real. Who was there the day the music died is the true question, not only what they discovered in that attic. Elvis Presley was discovered unconscious on August 16, 1977, in his personal restroom at Graceland, which he had previously referred to as his haven. He was taken to the hospital immediately, but hours later, the unimaginable was confirmed. At the age of 42, the rock and roll king passed away. Fans and specialists weren't happy with the doctor's original report that his heart just stopped due to cardiac arrhythmia. Something didn't feel right. Clear indications of a long-term prescription were found by an autopsy team. Use of D drugs, however, the medical community was taken aback when Dr. Jerry Francisco, who was not even a member of the medical staff, made a surprising public statement claiming that medicines had nothing to do with Elvis's demise. When the toxicology report was eventually made public, it revealed a troubling picture of Elvis's system being overloaded with potent derogatants, such as dilaudid quaaludes, Percodan Demoral, and codeine, far above therapeutic levels. However, many people thought it was an attempt to preserve his legacy. Fans were terrified. How had things gotten this bad? Who had allowed this to happen? How deep was the cover-up? If Doug was involved, what were they afraid people would discover the doctor who claimed to be saving Elvis in the attic above his bedroom? Then all of a sudden, I saw Margarita, and I was apprehended. Enter Dr. George Nichopoulos, better known as Dr. Nick. He wrote more than 8,000 dosages of potent drugs for Elvis Presley between 1975 and 1977. Amphetamines, sedatives, and painkillers, they were all bearing his name. When asked, Dr. Nick did not refute it, rather, he justified his behavior by saying he was engaging in damage reduction. He claimed that Elvis was already severely addicted and that regulating his supply through legal means was the only way to keep him away from risky street drogs. Amazingly, a jury found him not guilty of any criminal charges related to the king's death, but the narrative didn't stop there. He was under increased scrutiny by 1980 for overprescribing to other celebrities, including Jerry Lee Lewis, in addition to Elvis. In 1995, the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners had had enough and permanently revoked his medical license, citing a risky pattern of overprescribing. Then something unexpected happened. In her shocking book Destined to Die Young, published in 2020, author Sally A. Hodel makes the case that Elvis Presley's death was actually caused by a number of inherited cardiac diseases and long-term health problems that were concealed by his usage of prescription D drugs rather than addiction. She said that rather than destroying himself, Elvis was attempting to live by coping with excruciating suffering in the only way he knew how. What did the Presley family actually know about his ailment, and what were they concealing in that attic for almost 50 years? Something so intimate that it couldn't be revealed to the world until now, if that's the case, and his drug use was misinterpreted for decades. A king-worthy funeral and a castle that shut down. Yes, I'm sure you were aware of those occasions. Memphis experienced a tidal wave of mourning the day after Elvis Presley's passing. Almost 100,000 admirers poured through Graceland's gates, hoping to catch a final look at the monarch. His body was shown for public inspection while wearing a blue shirt and white suit. An image that left a lasting impression on everyone who saw it. The funeral procession started on August 18, 1977, when 17 shining white Cadillacs rode across the city in a regal escort fit for rock and roll royalty. Legendary figures like James Brown were among the mourners. Caroline Kennedy, Sammy Davis Jr., and of course, Priscilla Vernon Presley and Lisa Marie. Elvis was buried at Forest Hill Cemetery beside his cherished mother, Gladys. However, the calm was short-lived. 2 days later, the Presley family was rocked by an odd and terrifying incident. In a failed ransom attempt, a gang of guys tried to steal Elvis's coffin. They were just charged with trespassing, but the message was clear. Elvis was not safe, even in death. Fearing a second try, Vernon Presley took a risky move. Inside the meditation garden that Elvis had designed, Elvis and Gladys were quietly raised at Graceland. The mansion, which is now a stronghold of memory and legacy, was placed under lockdown. Rooms were shut, doors were secured, and the attic in particular was locked and never entered. However, why isolate the attic from the grave sites when a grave heist explains increased security? What can be concealed there that justifies decades of silence? The Graceland mythology continues to expand. Elvis Presley, then a 22-year-old rising celebrity, bought a magnificent property outside of Memphis in 1957. The cost is $12,500. That's almost $1 million now, adjusted for inflation, but the house was already called Grace, and Elvis didn't change it. Instead, he accepted it and made it his playground, palace, and haven. The property had everything from expansive stables and barns to horse pastures. And even a very naughty pet chimpanzee named Scatter Elvis, who would dress him up and play intricate practical jokes that left guests wondering if the monkey was actually in charge. Elvis designed the meditation garden, one of the estate's most tranquil areas, in 1964. It had white columns, fountains, and flowers. He would spend hours there thinking about life and maybe the stress of ruling. Later on, that serene garden will serve as his eternal home. But the mystery wasn't limited to the garden. The whole second story of Graceland, including the restroom where he was discovered, was blocked off after Elvis Presley passed away in 1977. Even when Graceland reopened to the public in 1982, the upstairs was completely off-limits. Presidents and other world leaders were not permitted to ascend there, but what was immediately above it was much more secret than the second floor. The loft, no pictures, no comments, just quiet. What was it about the attic that caused even the Presley family to pretend it didn't exist, and why is it only now, after all these years, being opened? This is an Elvis Presley you've never seen before, but a legal struggle almost destroyed it all. Something that occurred in 2024 rocked both the city of Memphis and the fan base of Elvis Presley. Graceland was put up for sale by an enigmatic business named Nozen Investments and Private Lending LLC, which claimed that Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter and heir, had fallen behind on a loan. It was unimaginable. How is it possible that the most famous residence in American music history may end up in private hands? Riley, who is currently the trustee of Graceland's Promenade Trust, acted quickly. She sued, claiming that the entire purchase was fraudulent and that there was a plot to take advantage of her family's history through fake paperwork. The drama ended with a last-minute legal dispute. A Tennessee court intervened just 1 day prior to the planned auction, completely halting the transaction. In his decision, he referred to Graceland as a unique cultural resource and emphasized that the public would suffer irreversible harm if it disappeared. Oddly, neither Nosen nor any members of Riley's legal team showed up for court. Although the decision was upheld and Graceland was safe, the whole situation raised an uneasy query. Would a private investor have attacked the attic, broken through its mysteries, and revealed something the Presley family had kept hidden for a reason? What if the court hadn't intervened? What if a private investor had taken over Elvis Presley's most holy space? After almost 50 years of silence, Graceland's archivists eventually opened the attic door in 2025. They entered a room that had been shut since the day Elvis died in 1977, and there was only a silent moment, no news conference, no big statement. What they discovered within was nothing short of astounding. Boxes covered in decades' worth of dust lined the walls, containing personal items preserved in time, handwritten lyrics scrawled on napkins, torn notebook pages, unpublished photographs of intimate moments never seen by the public, piles of unread fan mail, early concert posters, rare stage costumes, and even some of Elvis Presley's childhood toys as mementos from the boy who became a king. One leather jacket in particular caught our attention. Inside was a tiny handwritten message that said, "Wear this when you need to disappear." Although it was unsettlingly intimate and suggested a man who might have wanted to avoid attention, it wasn't the most horrifying aspect of the finding. Because the next discovery made by archivists has the power to completely alter our understanding of Elvis Presley in his last days and wasn't just something that should be kept in a museum. Nobody knew about the recordings, so I said it was pointless to mention them. Yes, it is. Among the dust-covered artifacts, archaeologists found a solitary, plain box with fading ink on it. 1976 practice sessions reel-to-reel cassettes that had not been listened to or handled in almost 50 years were included within. The silence in the room was caused by what they contained. These were uncut, private rehearsals rather than studio takes or commercial recordings. Elvis by himself freely playing with early synthesizer sounds, gospel hymns, and soulful blues riffs, all of which alluded to a path he would never follow. However, one tape was more noticeable than the others. Elvis sang a slowed-down, eerily melancholic rendition of the Unchained Melody on it. There are no background voices or instruments, just his voice shaking and cracking with emotion. It had only been captured a few months before to his death. It was more than just music, it was a heartbreaking farewell wrapped in melody, and that was just one box. Others included reams of fan mail that had not yet been opened and were still in their original envelopes. Some came from young performers or devoted admirers, while others were from mourning families or soldiers stationed abroad. One letter caught our attention. Fans begged him to postpone his 1976 tour for his own health, but did he ever see it or was it thrown into the attic and forgotten like the warning signs that no one paid attention to a youngster named Elvis? The things that revealed his true self your heart may shatter the more you fall in love. Nestled among vintage recording equipment and glittery stage costumes were relics intended for remembrance rather than museum display. A battered teddy bear from the youngster's early years in Tupelo was one of the quiet, potent remnants of the boy who lived before the king. A Bible that his mother, Gladys, gave him his high school yearbook was jam-packed with handwritten notes, and its pages were lovingly thumb-marked and bookmarked. Stupid drawings and autographs from students who knew him before his name was completely engulfed by celebrity. These were more than just items. They were sentimental mementos that he had preserved for himself rather than for his admirers. Lisa Marie Presley famously said, "I can come here at any time and look through the boxes, it's comforting." That brief remark disclosed a great deal. The attic served as more than just storage, it was a hallowed space where the Father, Son, and man behind the icon still lived peacefully in old paper and cloth. Through those boxes, an odd thing occurs, the myth of Elvis the hip-hop superstar fades into the background, and someone more frail, complex, and genuine takes his place. Will the public ever view Elvis the same way again, though, now that we've seen the man behind the legend? Did Elvis actually exit the building? You know, it's funny because I can only see the first row here, including you. When Elvis Presley was declared dead in 1977, the world found it hard to accept, and conspiracy theories quickly took off. Others said they saw him ordering food at a Burger King in Kalamazoo, Michigan, while others said they saw him the very next day at Memphis International Airport using the identity John Burroughs, a fictitious name Elvis had allegedly used in the past. Then came the books Orion, which claimed that Elvis had fled to avoid stardom and that the plot of the book eerily mirrored his life but ended in a fictitious death. Shortly after, odd recordings of a voice that sounded like Elvis singing and talking in disguise came to light, explaining his disappearance. The majority were swiftly disproved and revealed to be frauds or impersonators. However, despite the evident age and physical discrepancies, one of the most widely circulated ideas claims that Elvis is living quietly as preacher Bob Joyce. This myth continued even into the 1920s. Since the attic has finally been opened, some fans feel a sense of closure. For many, the notion that Elvis faked his death is more consoling than the reality that the king could fall so far so quickly. For some, the findings just serve to further the mystery, while for others, the artifacts, the letters, the tapes, offer a last, unadulterated connection to the man they lost. Because what else might be lurking somewhere in the shadows of Elvis Presley's unfinished biography if something so private and intimate was kept secret for almost 50 years? The legendary Elvis Presley is more than simply a musician, he is a cultural icon. He has sold over 500 million records, held more RIAA gold and platinum records than anyone else, appeared in Hollywood movies, and carried the burden of rock and roll. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously in 2018. However, through old fan letters, we are still discovering who he truly was in 2025. Tapes that have been forgotten, an attic that contained more than just possessions, and a battered teddy bear. It contained the spirit of a man that the world would always adore. What further?